Hello, I am Harriet Sams, and I'm a label-less person, I suppose. And when I try and think of what my label is, it becomes many words all joined up together. But essentially, um, I'm a heritage connector, heritage facilitator, tutor, and archaeologist. And through that, I've specialized in the therapeutic aspects of the built environment. So that includes ancient sacred sites that everybody might know about, things like Stonehenge or Karnak's stone alignments, as well as the more challenging aspects of our built heritage and the places that we perhaps don't want to look at, that tell us something a little bit more uncomfortable, a bit more difficult about our shared human inheritance, but also within us as individuals, we can also learn and feel an understanding coming from the earth that's not so pristine. So that's essentially what I do, and I've given it. Sometimes it's called cultural heritage therapy, and I work with the idea of archaeotherapy. So it's a little bit more broad. It's not just culture, sort of all wrapped up and you know easy to access. It's all of the built heritage that we can access in our local area.
Okay, sounds really interesting. What would you say it would look like in real life? So, sort of, are you taking people to these places specifically, or are you doing workshops there? Sort of, how does it look in practice?
So since the pandemic and I moved to France, all of my work's been online, and that's had its own challenges. But actually, it's been very uh, refreshing in the sense that when I work with an individual person, you can ask them specifically about their landscape that they find themselves in, and giving permission to people to begin a sense of belonging to their own space. You know, the scrub at the back of the house that, you know, that's by an old forgotten pathway. I invite them to go and explore those places. What do you find there? What kind of rubbish is there? What kind of earthworks are there? And then they might delve a little bit deeper and find that there was a disused gasworks or something there. And because of this sort of intense localism that online work and lockdown and the pandemic has invited us to embrace, the work can become really deeply personal. And before lockdown, I would often find a site, choose a site, and then take people to it. And with that can be very powerful in itself, because I would choose somewhere where I think to myself, there's some good work that can be done here, some challenging questions can come up, and the person comes, the group comes quite fresh, quite sort of new to the landscape, and that actually brings quite a different sense to the work. So when everything opens up again, and I'm going to start one face-to-face community work again, it'll be quite interesting to see whether I can merge the two and keep that sense of personal practice for people, as well as going to places that a community might actually require. For instance, you know, I think we've all, in a way, we've all now grown up with forgotten and orphaned aspects of our local community that we can just, trip off our tongue. You know, that part of the town that nobody goes to anymore because there used to be an asbestos factory there, and it's now overgrown and full of weeds. So perhaps I would, suggest that we go to a place like that and do a little bit of exploring and the practice. And the practice itself is ecotherapy, and the ecotherapy side of things can be quite broad. I'll try and explain it here, which I know that you're an ecotherapist too, so perhaps this is not new for a lot of listeners. But ecotherapy is basically essentially connecting people to the landscape and undertaking practices, exercises, creative things, sitting and talking or walking, and connecting to that other. So I'm not the therapist offering healing. I'm just the facilitator, facilitating the earth to be in open communication with that person. And so when we connect more to the built heritage, it's just added on really to what the earth herself can offer.
So it strikes me as a sort of shadow work, but with places out there in the external world rather than exploring the neglected and abandoned parts of ourselves. And does that sound about right? And yeah, I guess what would be the main reasons people would come to do this kind of work?
That's very observant, and I think that I would say a lot of my work is shadow work, the challenging, holding space for the difficulties. And I'm very aware that I work with a charity called Radical Joy for Hard Times, which was set up by Trebby Johnson, and her idea 13 years ago was to bring back orphaned places that we just sort of shun, because what humans had tended to do up until more recent kind of awakenings was to sort of blindside what was going on in the world in favor of the beautiful, pristine landscapes. And countless examples of that. We'd much rather watch a documentary about animals in the savannah and it's all very beautiful, rather than really turn our awareness to the really challenging aspects of loss, be it biodiversity loss or plastic pollutions or whatever. And that was her intention, to really sort of say, no, this is really important. And I know that with Joanna Macy together, they sort of were quite pioneering spirits with that, facing the shadow writ large on the planet, writ large in the landscape, and that we need to turn our attention to that. And so as time has gone on and my practice with that has moved on, and I've coupled it with my own work as an archaeologist, and then being trained as an ecotherapist, I've come to sort of hone that into very much understanding that we're just about to enter into something that could be very challenging and should be very challenging. But through that, there's deep healing and deep joy and deep personal connection to the inner wound and collective community connection. There was a phrase that Trebby heard long time ago, and the person who said it was an engineer, and his job, I think it was in the 70s, his job was to somehow get rid of an enormous pile of slag, basically, from this site. And he had this kind of conquering spirit, where I'm going to conquer you, I'm going to somehow master you. And then he sort of suddenly stopped in his tracks and realized that what he was looking at was an enormous pile of orphaned land. It had been orphaned. And if we then sort of break that down into sort of biological terms, into the natural systems, natural ecosystemic systems, where decay, rebirth, all of those sort of things is the natural cycle, which we would call the family of the natural cycles of the earth and the earth systems. A place like that has been so distorted, so intoxicated, so ripped from the planetary systems, that it has literally been orphaned from those systems. And you can think of countless examples of that. And when he realized that he was looking at this orphan with compassionate eyes, something massively changed in him. His job was still the same. He still had to, get rid of it and beautify the landscape. But he realized that this was the beginning of a journey for him to understand these orphan sites in the world. And then Trebby, a few years later, took this on and through Radical Joy for Hard Times and through ecotherapy, I believe, we can really bring that awareness to people, that we actually carry the orphan, we carry the orphans. And the thing that kind of personally terrifies me is that if we keep orphaning all these places all around the world, sooner or later, the unorphaned aspects of our planetary home are going to become so much more rare and tight that we just, as humans, are not going to be able to cope with the size of the shadow. We've got too many orphans in the orphanage. And so my work really, and Trebi's work, and everybody who now undertakes the practice invites us to look and to see with compassionate eyes.
And is it to look and to see, or is there a further step of what can we do to restore ecosystems in this area, or how can we heal the land?
The practice itself is very straightforward. So it's first off bearing witness, so going to. So let's use that asbestos factory as an example, and it's not been used for 20 years, but it's still it's just concrete and weeds and broken bits and bobs. And so we take a few people to a place like that, and we first of all we bear witness to our own personal story in that place. So you ask people to tell the story. So they may tell you that their dad worked there, or they used to walk past it when they went to school. So there's personal feelings, and then we campaign to get it shut down, and now it's been left, and it's just, look at it, it's just a mess. It's probably polluting the watercourse, and you just let anything and everything come up. And what happens then on an individual level as well as on a collective level is that the narrative can become really quite immersed and quite rich in its own stories. Then what we do is we ask the participants to make something beautiful, like a creation of a bird, for instance. And with the mythology of all birds in many cultures have such transformative mythologies, and that deep healing and cleansing aspect to themselves. So the bird is a beautiful thing for people to create, or a mandala, or something that just springs from whatever people are doing, and you with care, making sure that you don't hurt yourself, and taking responsibility for your own well-being, you collect what you find on the site, and it's usually rubbish, but it can be rocks and dead biological material as well. And then we step back, and that process of creating the thing, the act of beauty itself is often very transformative because it's very immersive. It's the people are immersed, and they get to know the more intimate aspects of that site. So they might see some ants crawling, or a snake skin, or just flowers that surprise them, or anything like that. And then when we stand back and we look at what we've created, we ask then, so how do you feel now? Tell me how your relationship with the site is feeling right now inside you. And again, that can be very expressive and very beautiful on an individual level, or again as a group. And often the feelings have transmuted into something of peace and connection and understanding. And that's the key to the fact that they now see the place, they see it as a being. And I was talking to a ritualist actually a couple of weeks ago, and she said it feels like what you're connecting to is the living mother underneath. Actually, the first sort of round of conversation was about that wounded, orphaned site. But when we then revisit after we've done the act of beauty, we feel the living, pulsing earth beneath that's never left. It just was hiding. And what then happens, interestingly, to answer your question, is that's it. We don't ask anybody to clear up. In fact, we actively try to avoid that kind of, I must get in touch with the council, I really need to arrange a litter pick, or that kind of do, because although it's very important, if it comes from a place of impulse and feeling like we are trying to impose what we think the site needs, often we can't quite see clearly, and we maybe need to go back a few times and just listen in and say, hey, you're not an orphan to me anymore. Can I spend some time with you? And really listen into what you need. And then activity and action can certainly arise. And often, in fact, there's many examples, but a wonderful example is Daniel Four, actually. He, who some people may know, he did a practice at an old mining site in America, and the actual practice itself was deeply spiritual, deeply immersive, and it was not about action at all. But on the back of that, the participants then felt this sort of right practice to then get in touch with the people who could then give a bursary to start tidying it up and to sort of bring back biodiversity. So that really does happen. The practice, but I think with ecotherapy or any kind of connecting to the landscape, we have to teach people that, in a way, or very gently, that the end goal isn't always about trying to fix things. And in fact, that can feed into a kind of a Western sort of sense of control and domination and colonialist thinking that's really got no place in what needs to be done in terms of connecting to these wounded places.
Yeah, and it's interesting that a lot of ecotherapy, or at least when you look on Instagram, for example, it's all about beautiful areas with flowers and everything is good, but nobody wants to look at these wounded places. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot coming up as you're talking in terms of, well, some people would say the metaphor, but I think because we are part of the earth, and of course, what we're doing to ourselves in terms of ignoring the orphan parts and the shadow parts, we're doing on a wider scale. So yeah, I can really see the benefit if everybody did start attending to the parts they don't want to look at. And do you find, for you, has it opened up more of a willingness to look at all of the shadow sides, not just places, but within yourself and in other aspects?
Without a doubt. Yes, I think that I see myself facilitating my own need to go to the places that are forgotten or hidden, or the places that as a little individual human being, I feel I have absolutely no autonomy over. I have no control over what happens to that asbestos factory or whatever. And it must be in the hands of someone else. It must be in the hands of the system somewhere. They'll tidy it up. And so all of that really is about empowering to be able to look and look beyond my own narrative of just complaining about stuff, complaining about the fact that nobody's tidied that up. Well, so it's like, well, okay, if nobody's tidied it up and I've just been ignoring it for the last 20 years, what if I did just turn and sit and be with it and found what came up for me? In terms of my own personal grief process in coming to understand all of climate chaos, biodiversity derangement, all of the potential horrors that are just around the corner. I know that this practice over the last decade has really helped me because I think it's helped me understand that I can be that kind of anchor to facilitate other people as well, and that we're all kind of floundering in many ways, and we just need someone to guide us through that shadow land and through that orphanage of the land. And also because I really love taking people to the places that aren't so damaged. Now, they've been covered over by the grasses, and and they are now archaeological remains. So they're no danger to the watercourse. They're no danger to the livestock or anything like that. And I take people to those kind of places, and you can still do very important work with people understanding legacy and understanding our ancestors and understanding how these places were when they were places. So there's really great work that can also be done in those sites. And of course, the final sort of spiritual aspect of working with the landscape, of going to numinous places that are just so full of that which reconnects and just brings life and joy and a sense of the ancestors being right there, so I don't see that they're at all different. They're all on the earth, they're all of the earth, and they're all part of the human story. And there's it's a very, very wide range of healing and, dare I say it, therapy that can be undertaken in many, many different types of sites.
You also mentioned Druidism at some point, right? How does that fit in for you?
I personally, I'm a Druid, and I trained with the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids, and I'm a mentor for their students who are coming through the Bardic grade and then the Ovate grade, which is kind of like the healer grade before you enter into the Druid philosopher grade. And for me, that's deeply my belonging, my indigeneity, as it were, being a Brit and being a European. My earth-based spirituality is just fully immersing anything, fully enjoying and fully honoring anything that can help me connect to my ancestors of place. And so I personally, I practice the 8 spokes of the wheel of the year. So, going around, and we have a party every 6 weeks. So it's really great to get one, one at the equinoxes, one at the solstices, and then you've got the agricultural festivals in the between. So every 6 weeks we have a wonderful party, which is wonderful. And but on a teaching level, I love to weave in how earth-based spirituality in Britain, in Northern Europe, can help with connecting to the landscape. So it's a personal thing, and also I love to teach it as well. I teach at the moment. I'm teaching through the Tariki Trust, which was based in Leicester, but it's now, at the moment, it's kind of ephemeral. It's all on the internet, and we're all doing most of our training through the internet. But you can become an ecotherapist through our training if you're interested. I'm sure I can leave you the link. And my role there is earth-based spirituality, and I offer all sorts of different workshops, which you're very welcome to all have a look at. I've designed them so that they're sort of earth-based, druidry inspired, but whatever your religion or none, it should hopefully be accessible to everybody. And there's a lot of space for however and wherever we come from to embrace this.
You've mentioned a couple of times sort of what's coming, and yeah, I think we're on the same page about climate collapse and the fears we have. So yeah, I suppose, how do you hope this work will help us through these times, if at all?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I wonder whether I can just sort of sit here and speculate about, 63% of people who come on these workshops say that it helps them, with their own climate anxiety. I mean, I just can't tell you that that's the truth. I know from the fact that we've done it for 12 or 13 years that practicing at difficult places in the landscape and going to and just simply being there and simply bearing witness, time and time again, the response that we get is, I really now see the complexity of these difficult, wounded, dirty, polluted places, and I feel something that I never felt before. And through that, I now have an inkling of the scale of things, which in itself is a container. It's a container so that we can say, look, here's the huge scale of our concern, but actually what I can influence is very small. And that, I think, that sense of perspective and that sense of really honoring our own individual landscapes, our inner landscapes and our local outer landscapes, definitely assists people to have a sense of belonging for a start, and empowerment eventually when they do get involved with whatever they want to get involved with. Yeah, I know that Joanna Macy has these wonderful practices of looking, if you wrote a letter to yourself in 100 years time, what would you say, and all that sort of thing. And I wonder, what would we say to ourselves if we look back in 100 years time, if somebody would say, your practice really helped my grandparents, and through them X, Y, and Z. Or perhaps somebody will write back and say, it was ridiculous, it was just everybody holding their hands and wringing their hands and doing it, and while the world burned, perhaps. And I think essentially it's about being alive, isn't it? It's about the complexity of being alive and being prepared to cry and grieve and bear witness and see what's going on without going mad. Finally, the power of the community is getting better. It's getting much stronger. We've now got a good online network community. We've got Facebook outlets where we do little cafes, climate cafes, not climate cafes, earth exchange conversation cafes. We can talk to each other. There's the Earth Ambassadors group that meets once a month, so we can all meet and do grounding and practice together and just talk about our practice. So we're getting really into the holding of each other, which, oh my goodness, we really need it, don't we? Especially in these times of staring at each other in little boxes. It's really important to know that we're connected, and the earth is connecting us. Essentially, the wounded earth has connected us.
Yeah, we've somehow created this amazing technology to hold each other through, well, what's coming, at least for now, while the internet is here.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing with me today. And is there anything else that you'd like to add that feels important to say?
So if anybody's interested in the specific charity that I was talking about, it's called Radical Joy for Hard Times, and we can be found at radicaljoy.org. And also, if you are interested in ecotherapy training and any of the things that I've mentioned, I'll put the Tariki Trust website up as well, and we've got all sorts of workshops coming up. And finally, if you are interested, or if you can think, I'm sure, Gwyneth, you probably, if I asked you, can you think of a wounded place in your local landscape? I wonder, it's just really easy for people to just go, yes, there's that bit of scrub, or there's that old factory, or there's that polluted river. And so if you do think of a place like that and you are interested in finding a way, a practice of bearing witness and like to meet like-minded people, I do really warmly invite you to connect to Radical Joy, and just we can start working on the practice together. We usually do a big kind of once a year at Global Earth Exchange, but obviously the practice can be done wherever, if you go for a walk and find somewhere, you know. So it's daily, weekly, monthly, whenever you want to do it.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I'm sure we can all think of those wounded places, some areas more than others, I'm sure, but yeah, we've all got them. Oh, great. So thank you so much for joining me today.
You're very welcome. It's been an absolute delight.